Hello, we're up to day 89 of A Course in Miracles, and we continue chapter 11, part 5, second part. So we continue the dynamics of the ego, verse 11, page 205. If the ego's goal of autonomy could be accomplished, God's purpose could be defeated, and this is impossible. Only by learning what fear is can you finally learn to distinguish the possible from the impossible and the false from the true. According to the ego's teaching, its goal can be accomplished and God's purpose cannot. According to the Holy Spirit's teaching, only God's purpose can be accomplished, and it is accomplished already. God is as dependent on you as you are on Him, because His autonomy encompasses yours and is therefore incomplete without it. You can only establish your autonomy by identifying with Him and fulfilling your function as it exists in truth. The ego believes that to accomplish its goal is happiness, but it is given you to know that God's function is yours, and happiness cannot be found apart from your joint will. Recognize only that the ego's goal, which you have pursued so diligently, has merely brought you fear, and it becomes difficult to maintain that fear is happiness. Upheld by fear, this is what the ego would have you believe. Yet God's Son is not insane and cannot believe it. Let him but recognize it, and he will not accept it. We would not be so insane as to believe that fear is happiness, which is what the ego would have us believe. For only the insane would choose fear in place of love, and only the insane could believe that love can be gained by attack. But the sane realize that only attack could produce fear, from which the love of God completely protects them. The ego analyzes, the Holy Spirit accepts. The appreciation of wholeness comes only through acceptance, for to analyze means to break down or to separate. I didn't mean to emphasize means. Kind of changed the whole sentence. I'll just go back. The ego analyzes, the Holy Spirit accepts. The appreciation of wholeness comes only through acceptance, for to analyze means to break down or to separate out. The attempt to understand totality by breaking it down is clearly the characteristically contradictory approach of the ego to everything. This is a big word there. I'll say that again. The attempt to understand totality by breaking it down is clearly the characteristically contradictory approach of the ego to everything. When we analyze, we pick things to pieces, we break it down, or we separate out bits. This is how the ego approaches everything. Analyze. Break it down, break down the totality. The ego believes that power, understanding, and truth lie in separation, and to establish this belief, it must attack. The ego believes that power, understanding, and truth lie in separation. How can power, understanding, and truth be separate? Well, to establish this belief, it must attack. Unaware that the belief cannot be established, and obsessed with the conviction that separation is salvation, the ego attacks everything it perceives by breaking it into small disconnected parts without meaningful relationships and therefore without meaning. The ego will always substitute chaos for meaning, for if separation is salvation, harmony is threat. If separation is salvation, which is what the ego thinks, then harmony is a threat to the ego. The ego's interpretations of the laws of perception are and would have to be the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's. The ego focuses on error and overlooks truth. It makes real every mistake it perceives, and with characteristically circular reasoning concludes that because of the mistake, consistent truth must be meaningless. The next step then is obvious. If consistent truth is meaningless, inconsistency must be true. Holding error clearly in mind and protecting what it has made real, the ego proceeds to the next step in its thought system. Error is real, and truth is error. The ego makes no attempt to understand this, and it is clearly not understandable, but the ego does make every attempt to demonstrate it, and this it does constantly. Analyzing to attack meaning, the ego succeeds in overlooking it and is left with a series of fragmented perceptions which it unifies on behalf of itself. This then becomes the universe it perceives, and it is this universe which in turn becomes its demonstration of its own reality. Do not underestimate the appeal of the ego's demonstrations to those who would listen. Selective perception chooses its witnesses carefully, and its witnesses are consistent. The case for insanity is strong to the insane. For reasoning ends at its beginning, and no thought system transcends its source. Yet reasoning without meaning cannot demonstrate anything, and those who are convinced by it must be deluded. Can the ego teach truly when it overlooks truth? Can it perceive what it has denied? Its witnesses do attest to its denial, but hardly to what it has denied. The ego looks straight at the Father and does not see him, for it has denied his Son. Would you remember the Father? Accept his Son, and you will remember him. Nothing can demonstrate that his Son is unworthy, for nothing can prove that a lie is true. What you see of his Son through the eyes of the ego is a demonstration that his Son does not exist, yet where the Son is, the Father must be. Accept what God does not deny, and it will demonstrate its truth. The witnesses for God stand in his light and behold what he created. Their silence is the sign that they have beheld God's Son, and in the presence of Christ they need demonstrate nothing, for Christ speaks to them of himself and of his Father. They are silent because Christ speaks to them, and it is his words they speak. Every brother you meet becomes a witness for Christ or for the ego, depending on what you perceive in him. Everyone convinces you of what you want to perceive, and of the reality of the kingdom you have chosen for your vigilance. Everything you perceive is a witness to the thought system you want to be true. Every brother has the power to release you if you choose to be free. You cannot accept false witness of him unless you have evoked false witnesses against him. If he speaks not of Christ to you, you spoke not of Christ to him. You hear by your own voice, and if Christ speaks through you, you will hear him. There's a lot in that. Might be worth rereading again in your own time. Of course, that's the idea with anything that might stand out to you, whether you're highlighting or just like to reread parts until it really sinks in. You're like, oh, I'm getting this. I'm really starting to understand how in opposition the ego is to God's thought system. How the ego wants to separate and wants to pull everything apart and analyze everything and make everything meaningless. And God's way is harmony and wholeness and oneness, connectedness. Seems quite clear, really, that the ego is just running on fear, trying to blind us from the truth. And yet it's got no power. We might be afraid that it does have power, but God's saying it's absolutely powerless. I think it's kind of comforting to know that. And I think that the deeper we understand the truth of this course, the less hold the ego will have on us. We'll be able to recognize it and dispel it and undo its little tricks and lies, the thoughts it tries to conjure up in our minds and make us believe that we're unworthy, or that, such and such might happen, or get us worried about the future, or grieving about some mistake or error, because it thrives on this whole idea of error, which Jesus is telling us to forgive. It's all undone. We're all innocent. We're all whole and perfect. And we can be free any given moment, and we can choose to see God in every brother and sister that we meet. You hear but your own voice, and if Christ speaks through you, you will hear him in your brothers and sisters as well. So which kingdom are we vigilant for? God's kingdom? God's kingdom, yeah. Okay, lesson 89. These are our reviews for today. 77. I am entitled to miracles. Yes. I am entitled to miracles because I am under no laws but God's. His laws release me from all grievances and replace them with miracles. And I would accept the miracles in place of the grievances, which are but illusions that hide the miracles beyond. Now I would accept only what the laws of God entitle me to have, that I may use it on behalf of the function he has given me. You might use these suggestions for specific applications of this idea. Behind this is a miracle to which I am entitled. Let me not hold a grievance against you, name, but offer you the miracle that belongs to you instead. Seen truly, this offers me a miracle. And review 78. Let miracles replace all grievances. By this idea do I unite my will with the Holy Spirit's and perceive them as one. By this idea do I accept my release from hell. By this idea do I express my willingness to have all my illusions be replaced with truth, according to God's plan for my salvation. I would make no exceptions and no substitutes. I want all of heaven and only heaven as God wills me to have. Useful specific forms for applying this idea would be: I would not hold this grievance apart from my salvation. Let our grievances be replaced by miracles, name. Beyond this is the miracle by which all my grievances are replaced. Amen. Remember today, you are entitled to miracles, and let miracles replace all grievances. Goodbye, grievances. Hello, miracles, to which you are entitled. May you remember to practice today. May you have a miraculous day full of miracles.